Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and with me today is Brandon Hickle. We're going to be doing our first fantasy baseball mock draft of the year. Actually, it was just me who did the fantasy baseball mock draft. Brandon wasn't around for the draft. We're going to dissect it. So with that, let's just jump right into the show, and let's go. Okay, so Brandon, how's it going today? What are your thoughts? You ready for some baseball?
Well, I'm ready, man. Let's do this.
Let's start with the first round here. We obviously, the first three picks go the first four picks kind of go as you expect, just depending on the order, with Mike Trout, Ronald Acuna, Christian Yelich, and then Cody Bellinger is typically that fourth guy off the board. Seems like basically everybody's got Garrett Cole going first overall. I actually like DeGrom, which I ended up getting with my first pick. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I think either way, you're going to have a great pitcher in either one. Garrett Cole was the big name last year, so, yeah, he's going to be the first one off the board.
You know, I think, the Mets, historically, it's a better park for the pitcher, and Garrett Cole is now moving to New York, where he was in Houston last year. So there is some change. So is he going to have the same kind of fielding? You know, like just anything that kind of when parts are being moved, I always tend to lean towards the guy that was good in the exact same situation last year. And I think the Mets, from an offensive standpoint, could be a little bit better than they were last season. So, again, this is a pretty standard pick. If you look at what I did here, so the people watching at home, you can basically see I point at it like you guys can see what I'm pointing at. But you can see that I took three pitchers right off the bat, and I ended up taking four pitchers in my top five. Now, I talked about this when I said basically what is going to change when we talk about a shortened season. And for me, I think there's a big drop-off at pitcher. So if I'm looking at this draft currently, I think the drop-off is right around Charlie Morton. And, I like Tyler Glass now. I don't hate Lucas Giolito. But I think that's where the pitching drop stops. So I want to get at least four of these guys, or at least three really. But in this draft, I ended up taking four because I really I feel very comfortable about the four pitchers that I got. And I think when you're talking about Roto, which, again, this is a Roto league, I want to dominate in one area, right? But if I try to dominate from a bat perspective, I already missed out on the big four because I didn't draft in the top four. And as you see, everybody took bats high. Now, I did not expect this, but do you want to build a Storman? Also took four pitchers in the first 5 rounds, and Snyder, Garden, Kopp. He ended up taking four pitchers in the first 6 rounds. So again, there is some competition out there in the pitching categories, but I'm probably, looking at this draft, safely going to be in the top 3. And I actually think I have the best pitchers just through the first round. So in those categories, I'm already going to be good in ERA, good in WHIP, good in wins, good in innings pitched, good in Ks. And now I'm just trying to find a way to be middle of the pack in all the batting categories. And that's usually a formula for a win in those Roto leagues. So thoughts on that strategy?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about. This year we're going to have 60 games. So, I mean, your pitching is going to be key to this season. So, I mean, I'm not going to tear you down for taking 4 out of the 5 picks there on pitching.
And I got great value. So let's go through. So we did talk about DeGrom. Then we go to Walker Buehler. And Walker Buehler for me was – a really easy pick here because he's one of those guys that could be the best pitcher in baseball. He's 25, and he's going really into his best season. Is he 25? I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But I know he's young, and he's really going into the prime of his career. So the point is like getting a pitcher right there at that spot with his kind of upside. And again, let me just say this that I forgot to mention. So this is a 10 via 10 league. So there's 10 bats, 10 pitchers, right? So in most leagues, you got to pay attention to the format. So like in ESPN, they do 13 bats. The standard format is 13 bats, 10 pitchers. And then in Yahoo, it's 10 bats versus 8 pitchers. So ESPN, 56.5% of your roster is made up of bats. And in Yahoo, 55.5% of your roster is made up in bats. So the bats, you tend to lean in early. So when you're in these 10 by 10 leagues, you got to kind of throw away those expert mock drafts because you basically have to give a little bit of that to the pitching because you're going to have more starting pitchers by percentage wise than you would in those other standard formats. So in this league, it's 10 bats, 10 pitchers. So obviously I value pitching a little bit more because it's going to based on like rankings you might find out there because of the format. So pay attention to your format. I know a lot of these custom leagues that I look at online of how the roster construction is. It's a lot of times it is even. They'll do like, 13 bats, 13 pitchers, or 10 and 10, or 11 and 11, or 12 and 12. So when that happens, know that you have to value the pitchers a little bit more than you would in your standard mock draft. So that's something I forgot to mention before we started this, but that's basically how this one goes. It was a 10 by 10 with a 5 bench spot. Again, I like Walker Buehler. The only problem that I really have with Buehler is that they're basically playing inside their own division, which means it's going to be a lot of Coors Field. And I had the same thought with Clayton Kershaw. But what were your thoughts on the next two pitchers I took there?
I mean, they're gonna be your aces. So I have no problem with. You're talking Clayton Kershaw and Paddock, or
no, Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw there.
Both on the same. Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're gonna be playing in the division, so you're gonna have to pay attention to that this season. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of in-division teams, so that's what you need to pay attention. Not a lot of in-division. So, yeah, I have no problem right there.
So I wasn't you bring up a good point, paying attention to the in-division like battles, like what division would have the advantage. I was thinking the Twins would have an advantage because they don't really play any powerhouse team within their own division, and they don't have to play the Twins because they are the Twins. So that's a team that might be sneaky this year because of just how easy their schedule is going to end up being. Something I didn't really think about as I was drafting, but something I thought about after I kind of dissected my own draft, and I'm probably going to take into consideration moving forward, right? So again, I went three receivers. I've been doing too much football. I went 3 pitchers early, and I really liked all 3 of the pitchers I went with. I think I got value in all of them. I think, again, Walker Buehler, this is basically where I have him. I have him in that top 5. Clayton Kershaw, I am a little higher on him than a lot of people because really this is about as healthy as he's been coming into a season since 2015. That was the last year where he threw for a lot of innings. Last year he came in banged up, and he was healthy throughout the whole year last year. Once he came back from his shoulder injury, I think a full year of recovery, and I know he's older, but he was putting up elite numbers last year from at least a top 20 strikeout rate. I mean, the ERA and whip was elite. So being that he was still doing that last year with coming off of shoulder injury, I think this year it's going to be even better. And I really just trust the older guys a little bit more than I trust the younger guys in terms of the short season and preparing basically on their own for this. Like, this is just another day in the office for Clayton Kershaw, even though, he's not going to get the same kind of spring training that he would normally get. Anybody that you would have taken in those 3 spots that I passed on essentially to take DeGrom, Buehler, and Clayton Kershaw?
I mean, I think wherever you're picking them, I think that's – if you're going pitching, I mean, I think you did it right as far as where they're landing and who is being picked. You're kind of setting the tone for those first 3-4 rounds right now.
Yeah. And then so the next guy I went with was Kintel Marte. Kintel, God dang it. Ketel Marte. There you go. Yeah. So,
your first bat.
Yeah. So that's the first bat. Now, he's not the best bat in my opinion. He wasn't the best guy on the board. I mean, I would rather have Charlie Blackmon, although he's got that Corona stuff right now. I do like George Springer, and then you got, of course, Alberto Mondesi, who could really, lock down steals for me, especially in the short season. It'd be good to get one of those guys. But the reason I went with Marte here is because he qualifies for second, short, and outfield. Now, being that I'm doing this strategy where I'm going pitching early, right, where I feel strongly about my pitchers, and I'm going to let the rest of the draft from a batting perspective fall to me, this gives me some flexibility, right? Whereas if you're drafting bats early, you can get those guys that aren't as flexible as far as position where they can play because you're drafting the guys you want. Whereas what I'm doing is I'm drafting the starting pitchers that I want, and I'm going to let the bats kind of fall to me so that I can find a way to finish middle of the pack. So that's the reason that was kind of the tiebreaker and why I went with Marte there, because I didn't really know what I was going to do with the rest of my draft. I don't really have a plan other than I'm going to just basically take the bats that are falling, the best ones available, which you'll see that I try to stick to that strategy as we kind of go through this draft. Any thoughts about Marte there?
Other than the fact that, he usually typically stays around the 260 range. And then last year, obviously we saw an uptick in average and hits, home runs, everything. I kind of see that regressing back to the means of where he usually hits. But, he gives us a look of what he could be.
And the truth is, I do believe in a little bit of what he was doing last year. So I don't actually feel like he's going to regress too much. I know the BABIP was a little higher than his normal average, but his normal average BABIP's a little lower than the league average too. So I think it's going to end up being somewhere in the middle. And it wasn't that high over your average. What people would expect an average league BABIP would be somewhere around 300. So it was a little over 300 this last year, but the 2 years prior, it's been a little under. And he's one of those guys that seems to constantly improve year in, year out. So I'm hoping that he can at least maintain something close to what he was. And he's kind of got a locked-in spot in that top of the Arizona rotation there too. So again, and like I said, I really like the position scarcity. Not the position scarcity, but the position flexibility that I get from him. I go to Chris Paddock, which Chris Paddock, I actually thought about taking him during the Marte pick, but I was like, no, I already have 3 really good pitchers. Let me get a bat that I can kind of start building things around. He falls to me again. I was like, I can't wait any longer. I knew this was the last round that I really had faith in the pitching. I knew that by the time it gets back to me, there's basically going to be Glass now, and that was basically the last guy I truly kind of had faith in. But again, I wanted to go ahead and lock in one more, that 4th pitcher right now, because again, that's still only 40% of my pitching staff. And you're going to see I kind of take a step back from pitcher as we move forward, right?
Right.
So any problems with Paddock there?
Nah, none. I mean, I might have gone another bat. Chris Bryant was out there. Let's see who else went before you. Aaron Judge was out there. I don't know if you kind of you're tending towards those guys, but another bat.
I will say this: I was thinking Morton as a pitcher but again, I want to kind of lean older guys because of the shortened season. But Chris Paddock as a rookie was just so good, and Morton is really getting up there in age. I just kind of felt there Paddock, but I really that was kind of the debate. I wasn't actually thinking Chris Bryant or Aaron Judge there, which I do like both those guys, but I just, like I said, I really wanted to get one more pitcher because in this kind of season, and again, with the DH being added this year, I think there's going to be more bats available in free agency. And in a league like this where people are starting 10 pitchers, relievers and starters, there's going to be nothing in free agency from a starting pitching standpoint. So I want to get my at least 4 so that I feel good about my ERA and WHIP. And those are the kind of those 2 stats specifically is so hard to come back from once you start bad in your ERA and WHIP because the percentages are just jacked up right off the bat. And again, we talked about pitching getting pulled early. So unless you're an elite pitcher, a lot of times those managers aren't going to let you play through it this particular season, right? It's going to be hard to get those wins, harder than normal anyway. So we come back, Anthony Rizzo. Now, Anthony Rizzo, I had an eye on even when I drafted Marte, because I was like, man, Rizzo is going to be – he's solid. The fact that he fell to me here, I was ecstatic to get Rizzo. I don't think first base is as deep as it usually is, which this draft's going to totally make me look like a fool in that regard because I ended up taking 3 first basemen. But Anthony Rizzo, I was happy to get Anthony Rizzo here. Really, up to this point, I didn't really struggle with my draft. I think the big struggle, well, the closest I came down to the clock as it was ticking down, didn't really know who I wanted, was the next one, which was Paul Goldschmidt. So what do you think about me taking Rizzo and then Goldschmidt? I have 2 utility spots to fill and a first base. So
right, that doesn't hurt you as bad. I was throwing up a question mark when I saw 2 first basemen right off the board, but like we were saying, first base is going to be pretty skinny this year, and I think after the top 10 guys, it really starts to get into the questionables pretty quick. So, to grab the 2 out of the top 10 first basemen, I think
And that's based off what it usually is. That's when we say skinny. There is depth at first base. It just so happens that typically your elite bats, like first base is usually so deep that I don't even worry about first base till later in the draft. This year, it seems like it does. It kind of falls off. I like Edwin Encarnacion, which you'll see me drafting here, but I ended up even waiting on him because I was like, I already got 2 first basemen. I don't want 3 first basemen. He falls so far in this draft that I'm just like, I got to take him. But the guy I was thinking about here was Stanton. So what do you think? What do you think about that? Would you have taken Stanton or Paul Goldschmidt in this situation?
To fill out your roster, I like Stanton. A couple guys on that level right there. You got Matt Chapman in that same round. Mike Moustakas. But Paul Goldschmidt. I mean. He's going way above those guys in the value. So
when I took Rizzo, I was really hoping to get either Max Muncy, Chapman, Glasnow, Joey Gallo, or Aziz Chapman. All of these guys, I was like, man, all these guys are good. I would really like to get any of these guys at this next draft spot. And then, of course, they all go. I'm just stuck between Stanton and Paul Goldschmidt. And I actually think that the outfield is pretty deep this year. That's why I was kind of went with the first base early because outfield is basically where you can get your value late. Anyways, I ended up taking Goldschmidt. Again, he had a bad year last year, but it was like all career lows in so many things since like 2011. I was just kind of like, I don't think he's done. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I mean, he won't have the speed ever again, but I mean, he's still a solid player. I think this is a bounce back year for him. I actually think this is a bounce back year for Rizzo as well, who struggled with back injuries a lot last year. So again, I like both of these guys at this spot. I wasn't in love with Goldschmidt just because I already had a first baseman. If I could redo it, I might go Stanton. So as you see, we come through here. Robert Ozuna was also a guy that was on my radar because he is that last elite closer in my opinion. The only reason I didn't want to take him is because I don't like him. So
that's a good reason.
Yeah. So not only has he done some bad stuff outside of baseball, but like I'm also a Rangers fan. I just don't like him. So like he definitely would have been a nice value there in the Goldschmidt. I have talked about how I do kind of want to put some emphasis on closers, and typically I like drafting a bunch of closers early, because there's so much confusion on what's going to end up happening throughout the year. Like there's these guys are sleepers, these guys are not. What I do know is when you're a closer, I'm going to get saves. And in roto leagues, I need to get X amount of saves before the end of the year. And in these 12-person leagues, it's really easy. They're the easiest people to trade is a closer, right? So if I get Ozuna, there's going to be somebody in my league that needs saves, that something happened, his plans didn't work out. To flip Ozuna towards the end of the year is easy. So that's what I found playing in roto leagues, is that the easiest person to flip is a closer, because saves is going to be one of those categories that somebody's going to end up needing. So what I do is I like load up on closers, most of the time the late closers, right? And I load up on those saves, and then once I've hit that number towards the end of the year or close to the trade deadline, I can just move those closers for other things that I need, whether it be speed or power or starting pitching. I find the area, but I always seem to have like a closer. It seems to be the easiest player to move via trade at that trade deadline. So again, Ozuna would have been fine there instead of Goldschmidt. Would probably give me more flexibility to draft kind of what I wanted as we move on here. So we come to Carlos Correa. Here, my decision that I was kind of toying between was either Carlos Correa, because again, I'm letting the draft fall to me. So we go back to the Marte pick of how I said, hey, I don't really know what's going to end up falling if a second baseman here falls as opposed to Carlos Correa. Let's say Mike Moustakas falls here. Now I can go, hey, I could put Mike Moustakas at second base and I can move Marte to shortstop. But what I'm going to do here is now I have a free shortstop open. So Marte stays at second or can stay at outfield. And then I end up drafting Correa to play my shortstop position here. The other guy I was thinking was Jeff McNeil. And again, that goes back to the flexibility. I think Correa is a better player. The only reason I even considered drafting Jeff McNeil was because of his position flexibility and what it would allow me to do later in the draft, being that he could play second, third, or outfield. But I went with Correa. I thought the upside was just too much. He's kind of a post-height sleeper because last year he kind of had a down year, but he's still in the prime of his career, and I think he's going to end up being one of those power guys at shortstop.
Right. I mean, he's a guy that stays pretty consistent. I mean, across the board, average, home runs, hits. He's gonna help you across the board.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Carlos Correa, I think that he hasn't had a career year yet. This might be, I mean, obviously this is not going to be his career year because 60 games, but he hasn't really had his best season yet, I don't believe. So, again, I think he's hitting his prime, and he really has the talent to be like a Francisco Lindor, Trevor Story, one of those type of guys, and I'm getting him so late. That's the upside, and again, his floor is pretty high as well. So then I come around here, and at this point, Corey Kluber just kind of fell too far for me. Former two-time Cy Young Award winner. He's coming off a very small sample size of what people thought he's done just because he only played in a few innings. You know what I mean? Because, again, he had the injuries. He's coming to Texas. A lot of people are going to look at the Texas ballpark, and they're going to say, hey, I don't trust Kluber because, you know, Texas has historically been that kind of ballpark that is a batter-friendly ballpark. What people aren't realizing, and I know is off a lot of people's radar, is that Texas is actually moving ballparks. They're going to a completely different ballpark. It's all indoors. And while we don't really have a good grasp of whether it's going to be a hitter-friendly or a pitcher-friendly, it's, if anything, we got to treat it as a neutral park right now, whereas the Texas ballparks, as of last year, was a hitter-friendly ballpark.
I mean, where he's coming off the board, I mean, he's not going to hurt you too bad if he doesn't do as well. I mean, the only concern really is here is, you know, how is he going to perform after that injury and how does he come back?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm feeling absolutely fantastic about my draft, right? I
can't figure you down at all.
Yeah, I've got five pitchers, and I love all five of them. I think I got value at every single pitching spot, even though ADP-wise, DeGrom probably goes a little later. He goes after Betts and typically. But, I mean, I like Grom there. Like I said, I think DeGrom's probably my number one pitcher just because I like the consistency and I know what I'm getting out of DeGrom. I like I said, all five of the pitchers. I feel good about the Marte pick because, again, it gives me some flexibility moving on with my draft. Rizzo I thought was just too good of a value. And then Goldschmidt was the closest I came to kind of doubting myself because – you know, there's obviously Stanton's there, but I like the Goldschmidt pick because the upside there, I mean, just a couple of years ago, he was going in the first round, right? Carlos Correa, again, another one of those guys that I think has the upside of Francisco Lindor, but with a high floor. And then Corey Kluber, a two-time Cy Young Award winner that I'm getting in the 9th round in a league where I have to start 10 pitchers. And then basically in the 10th round, this is where I panic and I go with Franmil Reyes, who I do like Franmil Reyes, but this was my panic pick. This one came down to literally the wire. There's a lot of people that I not necessarily would say I would draft over him, but I could totally see why somebody would say that at this point. So what would you think about the Reyes pick here?
Well, like you said, I mean, there's several guys you could have picked in that round, but like you said, it's a quick pick. You got to find somebody. And you kind of panicked a little bit, but Kyle Schwarber was right there. I mean, I
know I like Reyes over Schwarber. I think the upside of Reyes is leading the Major League Baseball in home runs. Like that's his upside. So right. Reyes is a guy that I do like. I mean, he's kind of poor average, but like his upside is there. Obviously, Contreras is probably the last of the what I would call like the upper tier catcher. I could have gone Contreras there, depending on how you feel about catcher. I just feel like the season's so short. If this was a normal season, I usually value catcher a little bit more. I don't know. This short season, I don't really care too much about my catcher because I feel like they're going to miss too many games. And I know it's all percentages, but for me, it just doesn't feel like I'm getting enough out of catcher. So I kind of just waited on catcher there. So the guy that I really wanted here, or I was thinking about getting, I ended up getting in the next round, which is Ken Giles. I probably should have gone closer here, but Ken Giles ends up falling to me anyway, which is awesome because again, I do value closer a little bit more this year. But some of the guys that I was really thinking is like I was looking at Hoskins right here, and I'm like, I already got 2 first basemen. This goes back to if I would have gone with Stanton in the Goldschmidt spot because I did like Hoskins. I think that Hoskins, his BABIP last year was just awful. So I mean, I'd expect some sort of increase in that department. And again, he was a guy that I mean, people just were super high on, just had a really bad year last year
Yeah.
by his standards, right? A guy like Danny Santana there, Tommy Edman, based off like give me some flexibility, whereas Reyes, he's basically locked into an outfield spot. Again, I don't hate him. The upside of Reyes is extreme. Again, he could lead the majors in home runs, but that was my first panic pick, I think. I ended up getting Giles. I love my next 2 picks. The fact that I got Giles and Kimbrel, because this is the group of closers that I really like to get 2 of. So Giles, Kimbrel, Nick Anderson. I really like those guys.
You've locked down your closing spot. I mean, you got 2 proven guys that should have a lot of work this season in the 60-game season.
And I honestly don't understand why Kimbrel and Giles are falling so far. Giles, I mean, these guys are locked in for sure. They're not losing their jobs. They would have. It's just too short of a season for them to lose it. I've sworn against drafting Phillies closers, just because I don't trust the Philly situation ever, because I seem like every year I pick the wrong closer in Philadelphia, and they never put the best guy there, it seems like. So Neris is the guy, but I refuse to draft a Phillies closer. That's my own personal thing. But I mean, from the outside looking in, if I didn't have that promise to myself, I probably would say, Neris looks like a solid option there. I think Phillies will probably bounce back a bit.
We got new pitching coach and new coach general. I mean,
yeah.
So it could be a whole different look.
Yeah, for sure. And then, but yeah, so Danny Santana, Tommy Edmonds, that might have been a direction I could have gone there. I really risked it by passing on Giles, and I ended up getting him, like I said, but I think I probably would have taken Giles there and just waited and saw whether I get Edmonds or Danny Santana. So again, I like my next 2 closers. Then it comes around to Justin Turner. And at this point, I don't have a third baseman. Justin Turner is a solid option at third baseman. He's just good. And now the Dodgers are going to have a DH spot. And I think that's just going to guarantee Turner to get more playing time. I do lean, like I've been saying, a little bit more to these older guys. If you look at my team overall, it's kind of an older team just based on the fact that it's a shortened season. And guys that maybe I wouldn't like typically, I like, because really the amount of playing time that they're going to get is not going to be wear and tear on their body. It's going to be really, really fast this year. So, again, and every game's going to matter. You're going to want your best players in there. And Justin Turner is one of the Dodgers' best bats as far as, like, getting on base and the things he can do.
Correct.
Any issues there?
No. I mean, as far as this, as the middle round and we get into later rounds here, I mean, it's kind of like hit or miss, right? You're just trying to get the proven guys that have, done it consistent over the last handful of years, because we really don't know how these bats are going to start off. I mean, typically bats start off pretty slow, and with a 60-game season, we're going to be switching in and out probably pretty often.
That goes into a lot why I want to go pitching early, because I feel like pitching is more can't miss. You can predict pitching a little bit better than you can predict bats, because bats, they go in and out, Again, so Justin Turner, I draft him. What is your catcher strategy this year? Because, again, I talked a little earlier about how, like, I passed on Contreras. What is your thought on catcher this year in this shortened season?
Typically on every season, like you said before, catchers, it's pretty slim pickings, when it comes, you want to get the top guys, but I think you can still wait on a couple. You got Salvador Perez here coming up, and I don't dislike that pick at all. I mean, he's going to be a hitter. He's going to be in there consistently. He likes to play a lot, so
I typically don't like Salvador Perez, but this particular season, it's just like he's going to play. He's going to give me those counting stats, and I know it doesn't make sense because it's a percentage based off of a regular season, but I just feel better about a guy who's going to play a lot as opposed to getting a guy that I just don't – that is going to be split in time way more frequently than a guy like Salvador Perez. And I don't think it's worth it putting a lot of stock into some of those other catchers, because of a short season for a normal baseball player is already short, but for catchers it's going to be even shorter than that, because, again, they don't play every day. So it's tough. Now, the next guy I go with Jose Leclerc. This is actually one of the places I do tend to get like 2 closers as well. I only got 1 here because I felt so good about Ken Giles and Kimbrel. I felt like, hey, I don't really need another closer. But guys like Leclerc, Kennedy, I really like these guys at this spot because they're going to give me saves, and I think they have a lot of job security in this short season.
No, totally agree.
The guy that I probably like the most here is probably Gallegos. I think that's how you pronounce it, Gallegos. And the only reason he's dropping this far is because I think people think Jordan Hicks is going to come in and take his job. But if he's out there and he's balling out, Hicks is going to come back from injury, and I don't think they're going to make him the closer unless Gallegos is having issues. So the fact that you can get him at this late, I think that'd be an option there. I ended up taking Leclerc because I'm a Texas Rangers fan, but I also like the fact that he's a starting pitcher eligible, right? So I did want to talk about that because if you're in one of these leagues and you do what I typically do, which you lean heavy towards like saves, and depending on how many spots you have on your roster, you could have, let's say you only have 3 spots for a relief pitcher, right? And maybe your roster doesn't have the P. The fact that you can put, Leclerc in there as your starting pitcher, you can start 3 closers in that scenario, based on what your roster setting is. So just keep in mind the fact that he's got a starting pitcher eligibility. It gives me another notch just a little bit because it gives you an advantage to start more closers than your opponent if that becomes an issue at some point during your league, right? Then we come back around. I go Willie Calhoun, who I really like. The only reason he's even this low is because he took a fastball to the face before in spring training before COVID, and now he's fine. And I think his ADP took a hit, and it really hasn't come all the way back up for whatever reason.
God, that's scary.
Yeah.
I hate watching those guys get hit like that.
Yeah. What you think about Jose Lechesi?
San Diego. Let's see who else is on the board there with you.
So I'm not gonna lie. This was a mistake pick. So when I drafted Lechesi, I thought I was drafting Lamet, and I was just like, oh my God, Lamet's still on the board because I wasn't looking at starting pitching because this is basically my strategy. Is I take those 5 guys early, and then so when I clicked on starting pitching and I saw who I thought was Lamet, obviously Lamet went in the 11th round. I took him, and then I didn't even realize that I didn't take Lamet until I looked at the draft afterwards. I was like, oh my God, it's the other San Diego pitcher whose last name starts with an L. So I don't like that guy. I drafted him by accident. Had I actually paid attention, I would have probably taken, because I still wanted to get another pitcher here in this range. And as you can see, Mitch Keller goes quite a bit later. I would have taken Mitch Keller. I think a lot of his peripherals from his pitching last year, I know his ERA and WHIP was really, really bad, but if you just look at the other stuff around it, I think that's going to come down. I think he just had some bad luck last year. I really like Mitch Keller. I would have definitely taken him at that spot. I almost took him at the spot where Lorenzo Cain, but at this point I've been waiting on outfielders so much that I was kind of like, Lorenzo Cain had 1 bad year last year. I mean, is he really that bad? I think he could come back and have a bounce back year. This is why I'm waiting on bats, because there's guys like Lorenzo Cain. Byron Buxton was on pace to be a 2020 guy. I figured he was probably going to be about a 2020 guy this year coming into this season. And obviously we don't have enough games, but he's going to give you that kind of talent at his position, right? So I feel comfortable with him. At this point, like I said, I already have so many 2 first basemen, and I just been staring at Edwin Encarnacion this whole time going, golly, why is nobody else taking any first basemen? And then at this point, it was just too far, and I had to take him, is the way I saw it. And then as you can see here, after that, Andrew McCutchen was still on the board, which I love McCutchen. Maybe he's the second best on-base guy in Philly, right? So he's still going to be batting up at the top of the lineup going into this year. I think that's going to be great. I took Quinn Tana with my next pick, and that was before I found out that he's gonna have surgery, which just came out post this draft. But he's got something going on with his finger. I guess he cut himself washing dishes, right? Rich Hill's a pretty easy pick for me here. I kind of saw him on the draft board. I saw where his ADP was. I think I might have even drafted him a little higher had this been a real draft, because Rich Hill, when he pitches, he's fantastic. So like the thing is, he just never is able to stay healthy. But in this little short season, if he pitches, I'm starting him, and I feel comfortable with him every single time he lines up to pitch. This is towards the end of the draft, so I could drop him if he hits the IL or something like that. But that's where we go here. And then after that, I just realized and this is what I basically do with my last 2 picks. I filled up all my pitching slots. I've got my bats that I like. And then the last 2 spots, I'm looking just at my roster, like skimming it. And I go, okay, I've only got 1 third baseman. So I drafted the best third baseman that I felt was available, Nunez. I'm not like necessarily a Nunez guy, but he does have that ability to give power. And if the guy's left, he was the best available at third base, in my opinion. And then second base, I went with Jonathan Scope because I only had 1 second baseman. So again, I'm just trying to fill those roster spots at that point.
Right.
So anything that you want to go back and talk about in this fantasy baseball draft?
As far as what we went over, I mean, it's kind of like the plan here this year is what we keep saying is you have to go get those starting pitchers, and you're going to try to pick the best bets, and the bats is what you can. But this year we don't know how they're going to start off, and if you start off slow, how quick do you pull that guy and replace him with another? So it's going to be a lot of flip-flopping around. You want to get your starting aces and make sure you lock down that starting pitching role. So
yeah, so this is basically what my draft came out to be. Salvador Perez at catcher, Anthony Rizzo at first base, Marte at second, Correa at shortstop, Justin Turner at third base. And again, at this point, I don't really feel like I'm at some like way behind the curve. These are good bats. I like all these bats, right? Franmil Reyes, Willie Calhoun, Lorenzo Cain, and on the bench, I remember I still got McCutchen, Byron Buxton's here at the utility spot. We got Paul Goldschmidt at the utility spot. So again, these are bats. That's not going to be the best bats. What I'm asking my bats to do is somehow in Roto get me somewhere in the middle of the pack, right? And then you go to my starting pitching, which in a 12-team league where everybody's starting 10 pitchers, DeGrom, Buehler, Kershaw, Giles, Kimbrel, Paddock, Kluber. I'm just going to be crushing pitching in a Roto league. I should be at the very top. I got Leclerc, who I think is going to get me plenty of saves. He's going to be a fine closer this year. And then, so this is basically my squad. As you see here, the draft grade, I got an A+. Now, the projections are for a full season, so I don't look too much into the projections. And again, I had my own projections anyway, as opposed to other people. But yeah, so that's basically the draft. Looking forward to the season. Unless you got anything else to add, that's probably it for today's show.
Let's get some baseball going. Let's go.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
So that's it for today's show, everyone. Thanks for listening. Remember to like, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about my draft. Do you not like the pitcher strategy? I know a lot of people like to lean heavy in the bats, but debate with us in the comment section. We love to talk. We love to give our opinions. Let me know what you think again. And until next time, see ya!